social intelligence is the most crucial category of intelligence, at least if you actually want to succeed in the world. Connections are everything, and so are relationships in pursuit of many goals. And today, we'll be going over the entire category of social intelligence to help you understand and improve this ability. First, we'll explore what social intelligence means, breaking it down into two subcategories that make it up, and discuss how to improve both areas. Feel free to use the timestamps below to skip ahead, but I highly recommend grabbing a notebook so you can leave with practical insight that makes this video worth your while. So, social intelligence, according to the American Psychological Association, is the ability to understand people and effectively relate to them. Sometimes you'll hear people refer to social intelligence as social intelligence quotient, or SQ, but they essentially mean the same thing. Neuropsychologist Nicholas Humphrey said that social intelligence was beyond important, and he said it was what makes us human in the first place. And what's interesting is that there's an actual biological function to this, and to illustrate this, as research shows that when people engage in social relationships, it can be apparent with your blood flow, breathing, mood, and even your immune system. Robert Waldinger, who runs the Harvard Study of Adult Development, or the longest running study on adult life ever conducted, tracked the same people for over 75 years and supports this claim as well.
We interview them in their living rooms. We get their medical records from their doctors. We draw their blood. We scan their brains. We talk to their children. It turns out that people who are more socially connected to family, to friends, to community, are happier, they're physically healthier, and they live longer than people who are less well connected.
People usually confuse social intelligence with charisma, but they're two different things. Most of social intelligence occurs before charisma, and charisma we can put inside of social intelligence, which we can attribute to the exterior action. So we'll elaborate more on this later to help not confuse you. Social intelligence actually has a formal history in 1920 as well, and Thorndike created the term itself in a paper called Intelligence and Its Uses. He defined it as the ability to understand and manage people and to act wisely in human relationships. He specifically made the different kinds of categories apart from abstract intelligence, which is the type of intelligence that IQ tests measure. Although this guy's categories are kind of weird, so we won't go into them too much to avoid confusion. Around 1983, this theory was continued with Howard Gardner as he brought more popularity to the theory of multiple forms of intelligence and interpersonal intelligence, which we will refer to as social intelligence as well. And this interpersonal intelligence, or social intelligence, was part of the 8 different categories of intelligence originally. This pattern of splitting social intelligence is repeated throughout different professional models of intelligence, which is what we're trying to get at here. And they end up differentiating in the aspect of reading others, and the other is acting upon what is read. We can call these two categories social cognition and social integration. You've probably met both types of people in your life. The person who walks into any room and can get a grasp over others, feeling welcome by everyone, and then the person who can analyze exactly what's happening in a group and what people are feeling or thinking. Some individuals can actually be strong in one subcategory and weak in the other. So our goal in this video is to analyze the abilities that go into both social cognition and social integration, and improve all those facets to help you have a better application and ability of social intelligence in general. Our first subcategory is social cognition, or processing social information. Things like reading group dynamics, modeling minds of other individuals, and motivation of people fall under this category. Essentially, it's just theory of mind, but an application with a social setting. So for a long time, psychology tried to measure these social skills purely from the exterior, but we always intuitively knew that this was not the right approach. We knew that two people can produce the same external actions, but the internal understanding and status can vary heavily between those two. So understanding this, we can break this subcategory down further into 4 different skills within the realm of reading that social information. First is theory of mind, which is essentially reading an individual's mind and trying to understand what other people believe, want, and intend. Most of social navigation revolves around this, whether it be negotiating or building trust. I'd say this is the foundation of being able to succeed in those domains. David Kidd and Emmanuel Castano published a study in the journal Science in 2013 and show that people who read literary fiction, specifically the type which is built around complex characters, are able to use theory of mind more proficiently than people who only read nonfiction. I believe what we can take from this is simple but beautiful. When we can engage with a character's inner states as an exercise, we are able to train theory of mind. And when we can train theory of mind, we're better able to understand what people desire, wish, and feel. One thing important to note, though, is that literary fiction doesn't resolve the characters, which is completely distinct from real people. A good example is how L investigates light in Death Note. What L has access to is his behavior, timing, and reactions. And through this, L has to build a theory on the way that light is thinking. Another good analogy of why this is important would be something like football. And this isn't just for outsmarting, this goes for almost any interaction, whether you do it consciously or unconsciously. You develop an idea of how people will react to certain information. What matters is whether those predictions are accurate. Mistakes within theory of mind usually come from assuming people's words are a clear representation of their intentions. People's words are not often reflective of their true beliefs, which makes human interaction slightly difficult. To work around this and develop perception of people's true motives, engage with people's beliefs who aren't fully explained, or even characters like we mentioned before. Analyze what you believe that they will do before they reveal what they wish to do. You can even watch conversations with the sound off and try to figure out what is happening just by expressions and behavior. But for expressions specifically, we'll get into that a little bit later. Researchers use a test called the PONS, or Profile of Nonverbal Sensitivity, to measure how accurately someone reads facial expression, posture, and gesture with audio removed. And the research has found that when people train on tasks like these, their accuracy improves and tends to carry over interactions into the real world. The reason is likely due to facial expressions being universal symbols, obviously existing long before language. So perhaps it is our archaic language in a way, and we intuitively understand the more that we're exposed to that natural language. The next subcategory within social cognition is structural cognition. And the reason we can differentiate this from reading people is because this skill focuses on the shape of the group. So questions like who defers to whom, and which people have the strongest relationships, who leads, and who controls the group. You can be good at reading a single person, but issues can still arise when you aren't able to understand the structure of a group. Decades of small experiments were done on this contrast, and the status characteristics theory by Cecilia Ridgway explained that people unconsciously infer rankings of status from cues. Things like who speaks first, and whose ideas are focused on, and who interrupts people without it being negative. All those things implant ideas within people's minds of who actually controls scenarios. And what's interesting is that people reaffirm these unconscious dispositions, causing everything perceived to be reinforced. So, for improving perception of this, in the next group setting you're in, just observe how people behave around different archetypes. Things like whose words would get ignored, and who has more attention drawn to them, who controls the direction of the conversation, things like that. I know it sounds a bit cringe, and I cannot lie, but observing even for just a bit is enough to grasp the structure of the way that people act. Research on training personal perception found that accuracy on reading groups and status improved significantly after observational-based training. But what was important was that there was actual feedback, and this trend applies to almost every other category. Checking yourself after you try to make a read, and checking whether you were right or wrong. Finally, the last subcategory is effective attunement, or being able to read moods and emotions from others. This is more of an intuitive position, and it's probably the hardest skill to train here because some people can reason to what other people can believe, but their emotions will always cause uncertainty, introducing aspects of chance to social interaction. Paul Ekman's research on facial microexpressions, things like involuntary changes that show emotion, is probably the most cited work in this realm. There is a scene in The Mentalist that illustrates this perfectly well, despite it being fiction. I'll show you the scene, then we can discuss it after.
What about the tattoo? What's it mean?
You're not a big talker. I get it. So we're gonna play a little game of show and tell. I'm gonna tell you something, and you're gonna show me with your face whether I'm right or not. That sound fun? You ever steal anything? Did you ever cheat on your girlfriend? You like causing pain?
I never hit a woman in my life.
You belong to a secret organization of cops and other government officials. The organization sent you to the doctor's office to kill him. Right. CBI Director Gail Bertram is also a member. You don't know. Too low on the totem pole, huh? Agent Reed Smith is Red John. Gail Bertram's Red John. Don't know? That tattoo on your shoulder is the membership sign.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Right again. There's a password, too. Something you say as a greeting or a distress signal. Tiger, tiger.
Get out of my head.
So Patrick Jane is interrogating a suspect tied to a secret organization, and before he asks any question, he tells the guy what he's about to do. He calls it show and tell, or specifically when he says, I'm going to tell you something, and you're going to show me with your face whether I'm right or not. He started with questions that had nothing to do with the main question, but the purpose wasn't to finish or answer the questions, but to get repeated observations for proper induction. Inductions are covered in the reasoning video, so check that out if you haven't. So once he has done enough observation, then he can ask the real question to compare the expression afterwards. There are some good books on reading microexpressions, which can be very useful. The best I could probably recommend for starting is Emotions Revealed by Paul Ekman, and it describes the 7 basic expressions, and also how to analyze fake expressions. There's also Unmasking the Face by Ekman, which is a bit older and technical if you might be interested in that. Alright, so the other half is social integration, or the behavioral output of social cognition. It's the ability to work within a social environment, things like being well received, or forming connections, and influencing outcomes through your presence rather than against it. Within the realm of social integration, we have different concepts that play a role into the ability to output social cognition and improve that output. The next 6 are derived from influence, the psychology of persuasion, but we'll be exploring them as actual principles in the ways that humans think and feel regarding social interaction. We'll elaborate on each with research and, for all, how they can affect not just others, but ourselves. These assets formulate into what you know as charisma and charm, and once we explain all the different concepts, we'll explain how to synthesize them into those different outputs. So the first concept would be authority, or ethos, which is an extremely important concept. People usually comply due to this principle of ethos, and often even comply past the point of personal judgment that usually allows when ethos is substantive enough. You've probably heard of the Milgram experiments, and that research is what we can use to actually help elaborate on this. Ordinary subjects were told by an authority figure to administer what they thought were shocks of electricity to another person. Around 65% of subjects went all the way to the maximum voltage, simply because they were told by an authority figure.
Requires you continue, teacher. Please continue.
Participants didn't know that the learner was really an actor, and the so-called shocks harmless.
You're gonna get a shock, 180 volts.
I can't stand the pain. Let me out of here.
Can't stand it. I'm not gonna kill that man there. I mean, who's gonna take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman? I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please. All right, next one, slow.
At the end of the day, without ethos, it's pretty difficult to get anyone to believe what you're saying, let alone get them to take an action. And it's a huge reason why the way that you carry yourself and present yourself matters so much. Ethos is developed with multiple factors, but the 2 most important factors are competence and character. People give trust to anyone perceived as able in the specific domain that matters to the person judging them. This happens before you've said anything substantive or meaningful. Observers can predict competence just from short, silent video clips, and hesitation cues the opposite immediately. And it just tells people that you're not worth deferring to, and people won't trust you. So it's very, very important the way that you act, and every single action holds a good amount of weight in people's minds. Another factor within social integration is reciprocity. This is when people feel a natural obligation to do something for you in return after receiving a favor, even if it's very tiny. Reciprocity, alongside authority, is one of the strongest social norms across almost every culture, and when you take something without giving it back, or giving something back, it's generally considered as negative and can have social consequences. So you know that most people feel like they have an obligation when they receive something, and most people don't even consider what was received, yet they still feel like they have an obligation. You can see this behavior clearly in Dennis Reagan's 1971 study, which found that when giving someone a free soda before asking for a favor significantly increased compliance with a later, unrelated task, even when dealing with total strangers. The effect gets stronger when the favor looks personal and subjective to the individual, rather than just feeling like a routine or a gesture. Even you have felt this yourself, probably. When you're given a free sample or a nice extra favor at a restaurant, you instantly get that quiet nudge of reciprocity. The size of the favor doesn't really matter. What matters is that the other person gave you something first. So this usually looks like something where you're feeling more inclined to give like a tip or, at least something. Now, let me clarify this before I go further. I'm pointing out ways in which people tend to behave, for the fact that you can observe within yourself and others how this behavior works. I do not promote exploitation of human nature in these ways, especially in any unethical manner, because I understand that there's a notion of this manipulation that goes around and people trying to promote that manipulation, which I do not stand for. So, with that said, let's get back into the video. So, next is liking, or the factor of people saying yes to people they like. Liking turns out to be far easier than most people believe as well. It can be summarized to a short list of triggers that may be done, and they consist of things like physical attractiveness, similarity, and simply being complimented enough in a short time span. This is why people in sales mention similarities like the same hometown or the same college within the beginning of their pitch. They're trying to influence the attraction you feel towards them, or liking, so you are more favored to say yes. Though, to be fair, people do this unconsciously all the time too, so it's not always a calculated sales move. Sometimes it's just a natural, genuine reflex when you're trying to hit it off with someone. Either way, a huge factor tied to this is the halo effect, which is a cognitive bias where one positive trait of a person, brand, or object influences our perception of the overall object. For example, if someone is very attractive, many will be led to think that this person is intelligent, kind, and other factors that are good. But the issue is that this plays in reverse as well. So for the concept of maintaining liking, it's simply a process of removing the bad qualities and continuing to foster the good ones. A good example of this liking is in Crime and Punishment. The detective trying to track down the murderer, Raskolnikov, ends up liking him and sees him less of a suspect, all because he likes him a bit more due to his talks with Raskolnikov and his published article, which interests him intellectually. Another factor is commitment and consistency. It is the tendency for someone to stick to a choice once they've made it, similar to confirmation bias. This gets amplified if they've seen someone else make that choice. The reason for this is because individuals start to see changing your mind as an action of contradicting yourself. Friedman and Fraser had a study in 1966, which is now known as the foot in the door effect. It explains that people who agree to a small request first, like a small sign on their window, were much more likely to agree to a bigger request later, compared to people who were asked coldly. The effect isn't just about agreeing, but being seen as agreeing. The effect exists in private, but is amplified greatly when it's something public, like a signature, or a public statement, or even a sign in your front yard. So, after that, we have social proof. This is basically our tendency to look at what others are doing to try to figure out how we should behave ourselves, especially when we are unsure or when there's a lot of uncertainty. As psychologist Robert Cialdini famously pointed out, when we are uncertain, we look at the actions of others to determine correct behavior. If you see a restaurant with a huge line stretching down the street, or a video with millions of views, your brain automatically assumes, hey, this must be good. Advertisers and creators use this trick all the time. They show you positive reviews, high subscriber numbers, or bestseller lists. And when we see that other people are already loving something, we drop our guard. It makes us feel safe to join into. And then finally, we have scarcity. This just means that we want things a lot more when people think that they might miss out. This was actually proved by psychologist Stephen Werchel in his famous experiment in 1975, where people rated chocolate chip cookies from 2 identical jars. One had 10 cookies, and the other only had 2. Even though the cookies were identical, people overwhelmingly rated the cookies from the scarce jar as more desirable and expensive. That's why phrases like limited time offer or only 2 seats left make people rush to buy in. When something feels rare, our brains stop thinking logically for some reason. We just panic about losing out, and that fear forces us to act. So, with all 6 concepts now, they appear to all be different, right? But usually, when we talk about people naturally gifted in social intelligence, they merge all 6 of these together. Being charismatic is defined as being a special personal quality or power of individual, making him capable of influencing or inspiring large numbers of people. It's basically authority, social proof, and scarcity altogether. Charisma is made for a group and is optimized to move a crowd's impression of you. Charisma isn't a trait that a lot of people are born with, despite a lot of people thinking that it's natural. Researcher John Antonakis tested this by training a group of managers in 12 different charismatic tactics. So things like storytelling, rule of 3, moral conviction, etc. The managers who were trained versus those who weren't were evaluated, and the difference was quite measurable. Therefore, the skill is definitely trainable. Although I have many more instances of this, I believe it'd be quite redundant to give more. Charm, on the other hand, is developed by liking, reciprocity, and commitment. It's focused more on a single person rather than a group or crowds of people, and is optimized for leaving one person feeling understood and united. Psychologist Harry Race has tons of research on what he calls perceived partner responsiveness, and essentially it's the science behind what charm actually is. His findings show people feel close to someone and rate them more trustworthy and likable, almost entirely based on what they've felt, heard, and validated within a conversation. Things like being impressed or clever doesn't really have that large of a factor here, besides the factor of competence and ethos. So practically, things like remembering details from earlier, playful teasing to insinuate comfort, and using the other person's name all build trust. A great thing you can do that is fairly simple is just find a public figure that you think is charismatic and embody their personality and mannerisms. The word embody here is very important though, because you don't want to associate with them. It's more like changing or channeling their capabilities. This allows you to get a feel for the ability itself and apply it to your own self. The reason this works is because charm and charisma are not something that are based on genetics. We've covered how it can be trained, but it can also be copied and practiced, and eventually it becomes your own. So all these 6 skills come together, along with social cognition, to actually develop social intelligence. We'll get more into each factor in later videos. This summary of all is substantial enough to begin understanding them and developing them. I have more resources in the server. Thank you guys for watching. If you found this guide valuable, make sure to subscribe and let us know what you thought. If you have any recommendations or suggestions for the next video, be sure to drop them in the comments too. Thank you.